Thank you so much for all the participants who are joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you all with us. Today we will discuss commercial contracts in Vietnam. So I will start introducing our very honorable panel of guests and speakers for today. And we will focus mostly on the fiscal and legal review from our side. And then we have the honor of having the ambassador of Italy in Vietnam, Alessandro. Thank you very much for joining us today. And then Mr. Michele D'Ercole, chairman of ICHAM, who supported us with the embassy and with EuroCham to organize this event. So thank you so much for cooperating with us on these many events. It's very, very much appreciated. And for our attendees, just one practical note. The chat and the Q&A are open, and you're very welcome to ask your questions, to which we will try our best to answer during the final Q&A session. And in any case, post-webinar, as we always do, I will share the presentations with you, and if there are any questions remaining, please feel free to get in touch with us, and I will pass your questions to the speaker interested in answering. This said, I will leave the floor to Mr. Ambassador for the welcoming remarks. So I will leave you the screen, and thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Many thanks to the D'Andrea and Partners legal firm for taking this initiative in conjunction with us, with the Embassy of Italy in Hanoi, and with ICHAM, the Italian Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam. This is a very, I would say, timely initiative, talking about commercial contracts in Vietnam. And why? Well, first of all, because this is the free trade agreement between the European Union and Vietnam has just entered into force. On the 1st of August, the number of the duties, the custom duties between the European member countries and Vietnam are slowing down virtually to zero in 7 years. So it is, I mean, we all expect an increase in bilateral trade, an increase in bilateral investments, and in an increase in general in our economic relations with Vietnam. So this webinar is timely. It's timely also because of COVID-19. Direct personal relations are getting increasingly difficult, in some cases impossible. So we have to resort to online contacts, and sometimes this makes it difficult to agree with your economic partners on some provisions and on some contracts. So having clearer ideas on how contracts have to be made in Vietnam is certainly very helpful. It is also a problem because the trade legislation in Vietnam, the commercial contracts in Vietnam, on one hand are understandable to us because they come from the French tradition and from the French civil code in particular. But on the other hand, they have a number of elements, extremely difficult and complicated, elements coming from the Asian law tradition, elements coming from the decades of communist one-party system in Vietnam. So the understanding, the legal framework of our contracts is sometimes not very easy. And also an additional element of difficulty is the language, because the Vietnamese language, as the Chinese one, is difficult. And the fact that it uses the Latin alphabet doesn't make it any easier, I can tell you. So very good this webinar, and I would like to take this opportunity, just a few minutes still, to pass some messages, some very simple messages. One is about the virus, the epidemic. Vietnam is one of the safest countries in the world. There's no doubt about it. the number of cases are is very low. But the consequence of this is that this is also one of the closest. I mean, it's a closed country. The mobility, international mobility, is heavily hampered by the situation. So for business people, it is possible to come to Vietnam, but they have to undergo 14 days of quarantine, compulsory quarantine. And getting an authorization to come to Vietnam is not easy. So you interested business people have to really invest time and energy in this, because the number of papers and documents and tests and everything is quite burdensome. So this is my first point. The second one is the economic growth of Vietnam. Vietnam was used to have a 7% growth average per year, and despite coronavirus, it will continue to have a positive growth in 2020. One of the few countries in the world to have a positive economic growth. And this is the International Monetary Fund saying this, the World Bank, not the Vietnamese government. So it is a reliable information that the growth, economic growth in Vietnam continues. And somehow it's a small engine, a small pusher of the economic world demand and world growth. Vietnam, despite being a country of limited overall economic strength, it is an important trader in the international arena, and in these times of crisis, it's certainly a place to invest, a place to come and trade. Third message, we have a very good bilateral relation, Italy and Vietnam. At government level, we have an intense dialogue, an excellent bilateral relation, and in particular, we have a joint commission, a joint economic commission meeting every year. Of course, in 2020, this has not been possible, but we have this channel of communication where we can bring to the attention of the Vietnamese authorities any issues of concern. For example, in legal affairs, legal terms, specific litigation cases of particular relevance, we can bring it and raise it during these annual joint economic commission meetings. And finally, the FTA, European Union and Vietnam have agreed on a very ambitious free trade agreement. We count on that to maintain a good level of bilateral trade, which unfortunately has been declining this year for obvious reasons, for reasons related to COVID-19. But just for your information, in 2019, our bilateral trade reached 4.5 billion euros with a deficit on the Italian side. But at the same time, if you look at the sectors, if you look at the items that are traded, you understand that this import and export between Italy and Vietnam are very much interrelated. And so also our import from Vietnam is functional to the Italian economic growth and well-being. So it is a very convenient and mutually profitable trade, that one between Italy and Vietnam. And finally, let me remind to you all the many programs launched by the Italian government to sustain and support our companies during these times of crisis. I'm sure you have heard of the Patto per l'Export. There are a number of instruments available for, especially for small and medium companies, And I would like here only refer to one of them, and that is the semester fund, 394 fund, which is available to small and medium companies, and they are partly grant and partly loan at very good conditions to finance exactly what companies need to come to Vietnam for doing business. For example, it is possible to get a loan from Semester to open an office in Vietnam, or to recruit some staff in Vietnam, or to make a market study on your specific product or sector of interest. So Semester is the right instrument for small and medium companies interested to come to Vietnam and explore this market ahead of the European Union Free Trade Agreement in place. I will stop here, and my greetings to all the audience, and my compliments again to D'Andrea and partners for taking this initiative and organizing this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. It was very appreciated, and especially all the mentioning of the FTA, which of course it's been a very hot topic. And especially because I know that many of the attendees here are small and medium enterprises who are very much interested in expanding in Vietnam. So I'm very sure that they will have taken notes about the programs that you just mentioned. And this said, I am very happy now to leave the floor to Mr. D'Ercole, who is the chairman of ICHAM with a very long experience in Vietnam. So please share with us the insights that you have.
Welcome to everybody. Thanks to attending with us the ambassador from Hanoi. And of course, thanks to D'Andrea and partners. We already, I think, the third time that this year co-host one event together. And as ICHAM, we are always very happy to support our members when they ask us to organize this kind of event. This year, due to COVID, the pandemic, we are very active on Zoom and webinar activities. And of course, this is very important for our member, because one of the most important activities that as ICHAM we will do is try to help our member to get all the information related to the situation that we are living right now. And this kind of webinar and using digital platform, organize these activities, help a lot our, of course, not only the contact with D'Andrea partners, but also our members. And we already organized the latest webinar on 13th of August, also to updating what the ambassador already mentioned, the situation of the COVID in Vietnam. And unfortunately, the borders still closed, a little bit complicated to enter. And this affected a little bit the business, as everybody knows. We talk about today commercial contract, but we see the numbers and statistics about Vietnam. As the ambassador already mentioned, probably 2020, the GDP of Vietnam will grow despite these difficulties. And the statistic that we saw the first 6 months about Vietnam trade surplus is over $4 billion. So we can see that even this difficult situation, the Vietnamese market and country is still quite almost okay on the business point of view. At the moment, we have about 122 billion for export and 117 billion import. This is the first 6 months activities. And the major sectors, the more stronger are all the electronics, about the import, the export on the phones and computers and electronics product, but still textile, machinery and footwear. This is the main sectors that's still growing in Vietnam for the export. Some of them also are involved Italian product. The first product that Italy sells to Vietnam is machinery. of course, like number, volume, and amount. Of course, Italy is quite strong also in other sectors, the traditional one like furniture, food, and fashion. But you know, this year is a little bit more complicated. The first 6 months statistic for bilateral trade between Italy and Vietnam, we have negative numbers, about less 20-25% in export and less 15% in import. Unfortunately, you can see the many sectors are quite heavily involved with this crisis, especially in the hospitality, as everybody can imagine. Tourists, of course, all the business related, the airlines, you know, the flights, it's reduced a lot around the world, also of course in Vietnam. But other sector as the classic strong Vietnamese, because even during the lockdown in Vietnam in April, March, the factory continued to produce. Was not a 100% lockdown. This helped the country still have this opportunity also to grow in GDP in 2020. Vietnam, related to the commercial contract, they are also improving. The shortcomings on the legal environment in the building the e-government procedures. This is the Prime Minister a few days ago already pushing to grow on this kind of services, especially to increase the 30% online public service. This can help also the SMEs to try to get more, I can say, transparent environment for the red carpet bureaucracy. That's still, unfortunately, one of the problem, one of the issue in Vietnam. But despite this, also the MPI, the Ministry of Planning and Investment in July, they show statistics where the FDI grow over 80% to compare the same period of last year. In July was $3.15 billion on the FDI. So this means that Vietnam still an attractive country for foreigners, and this is related to what we came to listen later for the speakers about the commercial and about, you know, the legal framework, because even this situation is a little bit complicated, still the company believe in Vietnam market, and also the Italian can play better role in, even if unfortunately the press is not so big, even if we have 93 members, so quite strong, the same number of last year. We achieved the same number even in this difficult moment. And the big player that, you know, the Piaggio, Ariston, Datalogic, Bonfiglioli, Carvico, and all the bank or Generali, on all the big players are still investing in the local market. We see many, these very strong Italian companies still increasingly market share in Vietnam. And this help, it will be also, I can say, a flagship also for the SMEs, have a reference. This big Italian company, they already have more 10 years experience in Vietnam. So what I can say in conclusion, that ICHAM, we are also on the side of our member, and in this case, the Andrea partner, to help them to sharing the information, to give information. This is very important in this moment, to inform the right way the companies, especially the SMEs, that it's not possible to travel, but thanks to this webinar and the digital platform, we can reach all the participants, all the SMEs, all the companies, to explain to them how can do business here in Vietnam. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michele, as always. And as you just said, for any company interested, feel free to get in touch with ICHAM for consultancy and for all the latest insights that are going on, especially regarding Italy and Vietnam relations. And now here I see we have some new attendees. I can also see some familiar names from our previous ones. But if you don't mind, I'm just gonna take a couple of minutes to share a bit more about DP Group and just, you know, to make it clear why we're doing this webinar and who are we. So as you can see, DP Group, we're a consulting firm, and we have offices all over the world, and our mission is actually to make the global business environment better through our work. This is possible today thanks to our founders, who during the past few years managed to set up 4 companies. So here you have the first one, the Partners Legal Counsel, where we have, our colleague Filippo from Hanoi office who will do the presentation right after. Then we have PhD Advisory Tax and Accounting, and here we have Tommaso Colli, who's the General Manager. Then Eastern Communication and Events, who I am representing today as the Marketing Manager. And what we do is mostly helping setting up the communication strategy for foreign companies operating in China and in the other countries where our offices are located. And then Chance & Better, which is our newest company focused on educational services for both junior and senior levels. Here, I'm just gonna go very quickly. These are some of the strengths of our groups, from international experience, multilingual team, and then of course seminars and webinars where we are doing today, and then publications, because we publish very often guides. Here you have some examples about our guides related to China, FDI, commercial contracts, labor law, and then because today we're talking about Vietnam, this is our latest guide, FDI in Vietnam, and then we have Certificate of Origin coming soon. And on this, I'm going to conclude that actually we also have ICB in Vietnam available, and if any of you is interested in receiving the Certificate of Origin or any other guides, feel free to reach out and I will be more than happy to arrange and explain how you can get them either on Amazon or Apple iBooks. And here, if you have any issue or if you need any consulting services in these countries where we're located, from China, Italy, India, Dubai, and Vietnam, these are the addresses. And now I'm very happy to leave the floor to my colleague Filippo Scaglia, who is connecting from our Hanoi office. So Filippo, feel free to share your screen so that we can listen to your presentation on the legal aspects of commercial contracts in Vietnam.
Okay, thank you, Gaia. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. D'Ercole, for the introduction. I'm gonna share my screen, my presentation. Okay. Okay. Yes, so today we're going to discuss about commercial aspect of legal framework of commercial contract here in Vietnam. Just let me add just a little detail about what you introduce us, Gaia. So we are here in Hanoi from our Hanoi office. We also have an office in Saigon, in Ho Chi Minh City, and we provide services, legal services to small, medium, and big enterprises. We can count you can count on our network and our professionals spread all over across Asia and Europe. We have offices in Italy, China, India, Vietnam, Russia, and United Arab Nation. This is our company structure. You can see there are the managing partner, Mr. Andrea, and Matteo Zhe, which is the senior partner from the Shanghai headquarters. And then there are our partners from Italy, Vietnam, and India. Our services, the services we provide went from A to Z to companies operating in business environment. We provide service assistance for legal compliance, corporate M&A, but also for labor law, and of course, IPR, intellectual property rights, and as I will mention better later, also for commercial contract review, drafting, and alternative dispute resolution. So let's get to the topic of today. We're going to discuss about commercial contract in Vietnam. At first, we're going to give a definition to clearly state what is a contract, what are the criteria to determine whether some document is a contract legally by Vietnam laws, what type of commercial contracts, what are we discussing about, and some key points, meaning some elements that are not essential but are very and highly important in a commercial contract. And at the end, some tips and takeaways from practical experience that we had dealing with drafting and reviewing of many commercial contracts for our clients here in Vietnam. So at first, the definition of a commercial contract by Vietnamese law: contract is an agreement expressed to recognize the establishment, change, and termination of the rights and obligations of the parties. the thing about commercial contract is that the parties, when the parties enter a commercial contract, they don't really care about the legal aspect. They are more focused on the commercial aspect, about providing the goods, delivering the goods or the service, and getting paid. How do I pay? What are the terms? What are the conditions? So, in our experience, we see that for big scale, for very important contract, yes, they hire a lawyer and a professional consultant that help them, assist them the drafting. But for everyday trade, everyday deals, which can be a purchase order for a supplier, they don't hire a lawyer, and there is no need to hire a professional for this. But now, today, we're going to try to give you some advice that can be helpful in your everyday operating your business. Because even if you make a purchase order and you just fill in some number in a template, that's the contract. So you're going to introduce some of the essential elements that are provided by law. So the object of the contract, what is the thing that we are trading? Is it the good? What is the product? What is the services that we are providing? Quantity and quality, number of goods, types and quality of the goods, price and payment method. Also, these usually people is pretty careful about the price and payment method, but always I always speak to my clients that you should always double check, because it's an easy mistake putting 10, forgetting 10, or some other material mistake, but it's an easy fix. So just check, double check, and everything is going to go smoothly. Because you know that there is a big difference in signing a contract for $1 million or for $1 million. Again, easy fix, but just be careful and double check. Then other essential elements of the contract are term and location. Where are going to perform the obligation? Where are going to be delivered the goods? Where are going to be provided the service? When, within when, for how long, for how many days? Then other elements, right of obligation of the party. This is the core of the contract, from at least for a legal point of view, where the parties agree on each other obligation. Responsibility for breach of contract. Usually parties, we suggest parties to agree to some compensation method of compensation in case of breach of contract. And dispute resolution method, again, it's highly suggested to parties to agree on an alternative dispute resolution method before an actual dispute arises. What kind of commercial contracts are we discussing about? Commercial contracts it's a very wide category and includes contract on every day that we are signed and conclude every day, such as supplying or distribution or agency, but also some manufacturing or loans or some licensing agreement for know-how, or for trademark use, or for copyrights. And all of these is the big family of commercial contracts. So you see, these regulation, this law apply to a very wide sphere of contracts that your companies enter, if not every day, almost every day when you operate in a business. So regarding key points, first of all, penalty clause. As I said before, we highly suggest to our clients to always include a penalty clause in their contract, because it has many benefits. It brings a quicker solution, an easier solution. It's you're not gonna spend money on a lawyer time on trying to solve the disputes, going to a court, filing a lawsuit. So if the parties agree before when entering a new contract, is going to be a better solution for everyone. Regarding interpretation, they always say that the work of a lawyer is to interpret the laws and the clause, and this gives much space to lawyer and to judge to interpret the law. The truth is that there are very fixed criteria to interpret a contract, and this is a big help for the law. That's why the jurisdiction system works, because there are clear rules. So for interpretation, there are three main criteria. First of all, the mutual intention of the party, and it's the prior criteria. This is where always that you always go to find to interpret a clause. You go to see what is the mutual intention of the parties. Second, contract wording. And third, rarely used, it's each party intention and customary practice. It's rarely used because you don't need it. Basically, you can solve any interpretation with the first two criteria. The only difference is that a difference with civil law and common law jurisdiction. That's a difference from the Vietnamese law. It's that the mutual intention, the way to the method to determine the mutual intention of the parties in Vietnam is made by a subjective exercise, not by an objective exercise, and meaning not using a reasonable person standard. So how do? You need a concrete evidence, and this means going to find an evidence. You try to find some message, some intention in the email exchange during the negotiation process. So again, it's not objective, but subjectively you have to use to find the mutual intention of the party. Force majeure. I believe that as far as 6 months ago, 1 year ago, no one ever heard of the force majeure until the COVID pandemic entered our lives, and all the contracts were suspended or terminated due to force majeure. The thing is, what is force majeure? A party affected by force majeure event will be exempted for contractual liabilities. This means if a force majeure event occurs, a party, the contract is terminated, can get terminated. Now, the question with the COVID, with the pandemic, was, on legal point of view, if this pandemic can be deemed, can be qualified as a force majeure event. Can it? It's not clear, depends case by case. It is not clear. The law doesn't get a clear answer on this. But we know that for sure, the pandemic can be qualified as a fundamental change in the circumstances of the contract. This helps because if a fundamental change events occur, the affected party has the right to request to the other party to renegotiate the contract within a reasonable period of time. So the contract cannot be terminated, is not void, is not null, but can be renegotiated. If the parties do not find an agreement within a reasonable amount of time, then it's going to be a lawsuit and a dispute, and the judge is going to decide to terminate it or to amend by the law, by his decision. Next, sorry. Okay. Next things that the parties should always be aware is the arbitration clause, because when dealing with international parties working with a Vietnamese party, it's always suggestible, it's always advisable to rely on a third party, so an alternative dispute resolution, such as having an arbitrator decide the dispute. And there are many. This brings many benefits. It's faster. You can have a more reliable source of a judge or an arbitrator. The judge is more competent because sometimes you can choose him. You can appoint the judge, and but there are some aspects to this that you have to consider when choosing the arbitration center. Because, for example, if you are involved with the Vietnamese party, Vietnamese counterparty, that is a state-owned enterprise or a partially state-owned enterprise, maybe it's not advisable, it's not the best solution to have a local arbitration center here in Vietnam. You may want to rely on a third party for an international arbitration center located, for example, in Singapore or in Hong Kong or in some other countries. Again, there might be some problem in the enforcement of the decision here in Vietnam if the decision comes from a third country. But in our experience, we find that there hasn't been any. So even if it comes from a Singapore arbitration center, the judge in Vietnam always agree with the enforcement. Then governing law, again, the choice of governing law in Vietnam, the parties of an international transaction, when there is a foreign element, they have to agree, they may agree to apply a foreign law if such foreign law is not contrary to the fundamental principle of the law of Vietnam. The thing is that the law of Vietnam and regulation of Vietnam does not clarify, there is no definition of what are the fundamental principles of the law of Vietnam. So it is not clear. And this means that it can be decided case by case by the judge if you can rely on a foreign law. Then again, I don't believe in our experience, there hasn't been any case related, any dispute arising for this matter. So it's no big deal. You can choose whether to apply to the Vietnamese law or a foreign law. There are many criteria to do this, depend case by case. There is no rule for every case, but there is no problem in choosing whether your proper law for the proper contract. Now, this is the last slide, and I want to give you some final tips. Quick advice. First of all, know the basic principle prescribed by law. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand whether a contract is valid or not. You have to be careful on the signature, you have to be careful on the prices, on the timing, on the term and condition. Some basic rules is just by common sense. Second, determine the subject. It has to be clear. There has to be no doubt about what good are we talking about. If the good, if we're talking about the goods, if the good is fungible, if the good is what are the quality of the goods, the origin of the goods, when is it to be delivered, if it has to be delivered by who, has to be clear. No doubt about this. If the service, the same. Who is going to do the service, when, until when, how many time, how long for. If the contract is auto-renewable, all of these have to be clear. Second, specify the payment term. This honestly should be easy. Should be any party entering a contract should be careful about this, because we're talking about money. It's the main reason why we are doing this contract. Because in exchange, I'm going to pay for the service, I'm going to receive the service. Still, in our experience, we found that when talking about payment, there are many details missing or that are not clear, such as when deciding the terms of the payment, of the way of payment, there is no indication of the bank account, or how many days from when. There is not specified, or there is a note on as decided, as mentioned in the appendix of the contract. Which appendix? Number 1, number 2. Mistake. You can make many mistakes, so check. Always check the payment term and the method of payment, because these very often bring to some legal disputes. Anticipate and minimize the risk. This you can do by, for example, by including the penalty clause, or also by including the arbitration, the alternative dispute resolution clause. Many different ways to minimize the risk. Ensure the parties representative are legally authorized to sign the contract. This means in Vietnam, usually for companies, for enterprises, the person authorized to sign the contract is the legal representative. And It's a common information, it's public information, and you can find this information on the ERC, on the Enterprise Registration Certificate of the company, but it's also online, and you can find this information on the Vietnam National Business Registration. Always check, because if it's not a legal representative, it must be a person authorized or appointed by the legal representative. So always check, otherwise the contract is void, is null, and there is no other way around this. Last but not least, always check the numbers. Again, I know I already said this, but it's the most common mistakes that we find in our experience. You don't have to be a lawyer, you don't need a lawyer to help you with this.
Thank you, Filippo. Can you hear us? No. Okay. Great. No, I don't think you can hear us anymore.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect, because we lost connection for a second. So thank you so much. And I also want to remind all the participants that the Q&A is open, and then if you have any specific questions for Filippo, feel free to also get in touch with him by email. And now I'm very happy to leave the floor to Tommaso Colli, General Manager of PHC Advisory. So now I will quickly share his presentation. And yes.
Thank you, Gaia, and a special thank to Mr. Ambassador and Mr. D'Ercole, and of course as well to my colleague Filippo Scaglia. One quick thing before we start my presentation. We obviously saw that there is a question, but it's going to be that is going to be raised to Filippo in the Q&A session at the end. So don't worry, your question is noted, so it will be asked later on. So as Gaia said, I am GM of PHC Advisory, the second founded company in chronological order from Carlo and Matteo, and inside, say, under the umbrella of DP Group. Very, very quick introduction. PHC, very similarly to DP Legal Counsel, is a consulting firm, of course, in our case, specialized in tax, financial, and accounting advisory. The core value valid for DP Legal Counsel are the same as the one of PHC, essentially being the ones for the whole DP Group. So clients' problems are our problems, and we strive to be as efficient and time-effective as possible. So our goal is to anticipate clients' issues, or if issues already arise, to try and solve them in the quickest possible way. The services we provide are divided in 4 major areas. Main area, I'd say, is the one of the outsourcing of accounting, tax compliance, treasury, payroll, invoicing, and all the back office activities. Second main area is the financial supervision, or the so-called internal audits. The third one is linked to all the M&A activities and other, as said, extraordinary activities. So again, mergers, acquisitions, equity deals, asset deals, relocations, new establishments, and so on and so forth. And fourth, business consulting, which actually means any kind of tax, HR, accounting, financial question that is developed inside a memorandum. So my presentation is going to focus on the Vietnamese tax system, linking especially with the commercial contracts that were developed in Filippo's presentation. First, I'd like always to start with the personal income tax, considering the fact that it might be that a person transfers to Vietnam to start his or her own business instead of being sent by a company, or even if sent by a company, still it's relevant to consider which are the costs in terms of individual income tax. I'd say that first, I'll say that my expertise, one of my areas of expertise being international taxation, I primarily developed it in China, so I will make many comparisons with the structure of China tax, and also because Vietnamese taxation takes a lot from the Chinese tax structure. So as you can see, in terms of individual income tax, the structure is progressive and proportional, similarly as it is in China. The brackets are 7, going from 5 to 35%, while in China they go from 3 to 45%. And the numbers are also quite similar, meaning that the latest bracket in China, the one of 35%, is the second last and the last go up to 960,000 RMB and instead of 960 million. So the numbers are like similar in terms of the initial digits. And I gave also as reference the conversion rate. If you're not familiar with RMB, 18,000 RMB, it's roughly 2,300 euro, or say like 2,600 USD. And again, these brackets, it's important to underline that they are linked to the annual taxable income. And we will see some other details later on. So again, to build up on what I said so far, personal income tax has to be considered in 2 different ways depending on whether the person is tax resident in Vietnam or non-resident. For non-residents, the previous tax brackets that I showed do not apply, but applies at 20% flat tax rate. How is the residency defined? There's 3 main elements, 3 main criteria. The first one is actually the same, I'd say, almost all over the world, meaning 183 days of residence in a solar year in the country. 183 means 6 months plus 1 day. So it means that the majority of a solar year has been spent in the said country. The person has the second criteria is the person has a physical residence in Vietnam, and the third one is a leased residence for at least 90 days in a solar year. Going further on the individual or personal income tax area, you can see that there's actually several deductions and allowances that can be included in the calculation of the individual income tax, meaning that the taxable income will be decreased by the specific deductions or allowances. There's many different ones. I'd say the most interesting and relevant can be the ones linked to working in new economic zones or in places that are like underdevelopment areas with like a non-favorable climate, and also different other kinds of allowances and deductions, such as the ones linked to labor accidents or occupational disease, and all the aspects also linked to the so-called social contributions, so the retirement and unemployment subsidies. I would say secondary in terms of relevance could be the ones linked to the telephone allowance, the per diem, and meal allowances, but not secondary probably in terms of the amount that can actually be deducted for these expenses. And in particular for expats, there's additional allowances which are, I'd say, the same essentially as the ones applicable in China. So the relocation costs can be offset, school fees for the children, the round trip tickets to the home country, and in general several other allowances applicable, which can also be like laundry expenses and other more minor ones. When it comes to corporate income tax, the general CIT rate is 20%. There has been, however, many new policies and tax incentives that propose preferential company income tax for a period of 25 years. In particular, 10% for the first 15, and then 17% for the subsequent 10 years. I would suggest, though, to cross-check with an expert about specific incentives, in particular in terms of corporate income tax, because there's actually even more preferential tax treatments in some specific industrial zones or industrial areas. When it comes to domestic dividends, there's no taxation. For capital gain, there's no separate taxation, so it goes under the umbrella of the company income tax. Losses can be carried forward for 5 years, similarly to what is applicable in China. And dividends and interest are taxed at 5%, unless there is a more favorable taxation because of specific DTAs between Vietnam and that set other country, and royalties 10%, again, depending on specific DTAs that can be reduced. There's also a withholding tax of 10%, they are split in 5% income tax and 5% VAT for technical service fees. When it comes to VAT and all the surrounding elements of VAT, including import VAT and import duties, this is probably the most complicated area when it comes to taxation in Vietnam. The standard rate of VAT is 10%, although there are other rates, 0 or essentially a waiver of VAT in case of export of goods or services, and 5% mostly for the so-called essential goods and services. There's also a special sales tax, which is essentially a so-called luxury tax or consumption tax, as it's called in China, for instance, and it's applicable on all products and services considered non-essential or frivolous or luxurious, which includes cigarettes, cigars, spirits, sports car, some high-end motorcycles, and some other types of expenditures, for instance, like clubs and karaokes. This tax, as you can see, is very relevant. It can be up to 75% of the initial price of the good or the service. And finally, in terms of social contributions, the structure is built on 3 pillars: social insurance, health insurance, and unemployment insurance. And as you can see, the majority of the portion of the insurance is covered by the employer, with a 25.5% total for the social insurance, 4.5% for the health, and 2% for the unemployment. Finally, a few details regarding the tax framework. The tax year or the fiscal year is the solar year, so January to December, and company income tax is declared on an annual basis, but it has to be pre-accrued on a quarterly basis. Personal income tax is declared on an annual basis, and VAT, similarly to many different countries in the world, is declared and paid on a monthly basis. Yes, thank you very much for your attention. I'd say we can now open the Q&A session for any of the speakers.
Exactly. So we actually received a few questions. We have one that I guess, Filippo, you can answer this one. So they're asking, if I have a customer who is ordering material regularly, do I need to have a contract for each specific supply, or can I have a general contract valid for any material supplied in a period of time?
Okay, yes. If you have a regular business relationship with a customer or with a supplier, either way, the best solution is to have a general contract, a principal contract is called, such as works like a memorandum of understanding between the parties, when you set all the terms and conditions, and within a period of time. It lasts for whatever you want, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, depends on your interested. And so on the basis of this, all the deals, all the trades or the agreements that are concluded within that frame of period has to be in compliance with the conditions stated and set in the principal contract. So only one general contract is enough if all the small and everyday trade respect the general condition.
Okay. And now, since the ambassador is back, I would take advantage of you being here. We have a few questions, which I'm sure you don't have an answer, but many people have been asking if you have any idea of when the restrictions, especially in terms of lockdown and traveling, will be released, if you have any hopes or expectations for the next months.
Yes, thank you very much for these questions. It's hard to say, of course, but it is probable, very likely, that this situation of closure to the foreign world, and so this difficulty in international mobility will last for some months. The government is very cautious, wants to preserve, they want to preserve the low level of infections going around in the country, and so they will continue to be very strict in terms of foreign people coming in. And this will probably continue for many months, and I would dare to say maybe it will continue until there is an effective vaccine in place. So this is for the point of view of the international mobility. I've seen a written question by someone on what kind of problems Italian and European companies usually have in Vietnam, and there is one category of problems which are recurrent, and this is about intellectual property. The issue is very complicated. There is a tendency in some Asian countries to do without protection of intellectual property, and so there is a tendency to copy or to use property rights without a proper legal system of protection. So this sometimes creates problems. From my experience, is the most common problem, and I would say, maybe the only one. What I mean is that Vietnamese companies are usually very reliable, and there are not many litigations as far as our experience can tell. But on this point, intellectual property, yes, it is an issue. It is an issue that is, of course, also discussed bilaterally and with the European Union. the FTA will certainly help in this because there are some provisions, especially concerning the protection of geographical indications. So the situation will hopefully improve thanks to the FTA. But again, I'm sure that for those companies who have problems in this sector, the assistance of a professional legal firm is essential, and I definitely recommend it because on your own, with your own resources and capacities, you hardly can really get the result that you want. That is protecting your property rights.
Thank you very much. Now, I know the time is a bit tight, but we're receiving many very interesting questions. So I will keep going with another couple because I have another few questions for all of you. And now for Mr. D'Ercole, we are wondering from your perspective, which kind of sectors or how do you see Italian companies being able to take advantage of the EVFTA? And if there's any, industry that you see booming, or what do you expect within these agreements?
For sure, we first of all, as the ambassador told, the FTA is entered into force already 1st of August, and some product already is zero duty, and at the moment is entered to force. And for example, machinery will be one of them. Also, textile. This product will be take a big. But I think one of the big advantage will come not only for the classic Italian sector, as the machinery, or we export, or maybe the fashion, the furniture, but I think also in the green energy, we have to put much more attention also in this sector, where Italy is very well known like expertise, but our presence in Vietnam is not so strong. This sector will be another big advantage. And also the FTA can have also another side to attend to the public contract, like also in transport and infrastructure. Also, this sector, Italy is not quite strong, unfortunately. We have we have Gala here, they make the metro in Hanoi already, but our presence in the infrastructure is not very big. I think also what the ambassador mentioned before, we have such a semester can have a good combination also to matching and try to participate of this kind of contract that the Vietnamese government can do easily. And of course, I think one of the most important is the presence in Vietnam, because if you sell, for example, machinery, you have to offer to the final customer the full service. And maintenance, for example, or backup, this is very important. Unfortunately, sometimes Italy, they were not so well organized locally. So they have to find a very good agreement with the local partner, also to, try to service, to give a good service to the final customer. And, customer service is one of the most important issue and key to sell your product. And sometimes the customer service for Italian companies is not one of the best. Unfortunately, some of our European competitors like Germany and France are much well organized here, but we have a chance also to grow in this. There are many opportunities. We also will try to do we already talked with the embassy. We have to do some webinar for EVFTA. We already already one of them was done in June, but we will do another one probably between September, October, to updating which will be the real opportunity that will come from the FTA.
Perfect. So I invite everybody to join because this question have been asked many times, and I guess you will have the opportunity to get a bit more into details about that. And now we have a question for you, Tommaso, about VAT within import-export. So what's the framework and how does it work?
Okay. I would very much like to link to what Mr. D'Ercole just said, and so build up on the FTA matters. So aside of the EVFTA, there's also ACFTA, so Asian China free trade area. So generally speaking, the matter of import taxes is very complex and varies highly depending on the types of goods and the country where the goods are coming from. So it's always relevant to consider the specific HS codes of the goods, and consider also if a country falls into the so-called most favored nations in terms of import duties and import VAT, or if it falls even better into NFTA. And in particular, it's also important to consider that exporting the VAT is zero, but importing it might vary, but it might also vary depending on what are the activities done by the company. So if the company, as it was a case that we analyzed for a client of us, is importing raw material, for instance, and leaving them in consignment to a third party that is working on the product and subsequently exporting the final goods, in this specific case, there's no import duties on import VAT on the raw material. And so the matter is very, I wouldn't say very complicated. I don't want to mean that like what we do is extremely complicated, but I'd say a good guidance it's necessary depending on the specific activities of the company and the specific industry, so the specific goods of the manufacturing or the trading enterprise.
Thank you. Now, I see most of the participants are still here, so if you don't mind, I would take advantage of our three speakers for one last question for each of you. And Filippo, so we have actually a couple of more specific questions, but in this case, I would recommend the people who ask these specific cases to possibly get in touch directly with our law firm, because I guess it's going to take much more than a couple of minutes to answer these questions. But for what we can ask now, they're wondering, in case the rights of a party in a commercial contract are violated, how long is the limitation period for initiating legal actions? Filippo.
Okay, so the general rule for the statute of limitation for commercial contract is 2 years. Mm-hmm. And that's the general rule. I mean, there are some exceptions to the general rule, but it's a very specific case. If I remember correctly, there is a shorter term if involves not real estate, but some other specific case. But I would say that the general rule is 2 years. 2 years. There is some very specific case which is less than 1 year, but it should never apply. Yes. Okay.
In any case, I am saying once again, for more specific, you're very welcome to get in touch with Filippo for this. Now, Mr. Ambassador, we have someone asking, how do you think we could further increase tourism from Vietnam to Italy? If you have any ideas or any any insight you would like to share with us on how do you see this going? Wait, I think you're still mute. We cannot hear you.
Yes, thank you. Until the outbreak of COVID-19, the tourism was growing in both ways. Our last figures say approximately 8 or 9,000 Vietnamese tourists in Italy, and 65,000 Italian tourists to Vietnam. Numbers were growing, and in particular, the number of Vietnamese tourists to Europe were growing because of the growing of the income of the Vietnamese people and the broadening of the middle class in Vietnam. So they like to have vacation in Europe in particular. So it was a very promising sector, that of our outbound tourism to Italy. unfortunately, COVID-19 has put a brake on all this, and at the moment it is not possible to be a tourist in Europe from Vietnam. This is a Schengen decision, so there is no tourist visa possible at the moment. We have to wait for a European Union, a Schengen decision to open to other countries and hopefully including Vietnam in these countries admitted to Europe. At the moment, this is not the case. But even if it was possible to go to Italy for vacation, then the problem is when the Vietnamese tourist comes back to Vietnam, because in that case he will have to go under quarantine for 14 days. So at the moment, unfortunately, tourism is heavily affected by the epidemic in both ways, and we have to wait for better times. That's the only answer I can give. Thank you.
Of course, thank you very much. Now, one last question to Mr. D'Ercole, and then I guess we're done for today. So, especially, here in China, and with me working in marketing, we saw a lot of attention putting on e-commerce and all the online activities. So, in terms of business and in terms of online business in Vietnam, how do you see this trend? Do you think it's, gonna go along as, in the same direction as China is going, or if you foresee a different kind of direction for this?
Online e-commerce business in Vietnam is very booming, especially for the local Vietnamese. They are very used to go on these, Zalo, Facebook, Zalando, and many others website, especially for the usual commodities. This is easily for them to buy, from clothes, apparel and shoes, and also for product for the house. They usually, the Vietnamese, they are very booming on that. They use a lot of this kind of platform for buying. But what we see as it will help also the Italian company to do business between using online platform. We are utilize now some B2B virtual platform, digital platform, but we can see regarding the company point of view, so SMEs is a little bit different, because as in China, I suppose, the tradition to do business in Asia is to have the contact between supplier and customer. Usually, this is a traditional way to do business until now. They have a meeting, they try to build a mutual trust between the two parts, and then slowly the business go through. So this side is a little bit complicated using the virtual B2B platform, but we are pushing to do this because due to the situation that we are living now, we don't have many alternatives to try to increase the import-export between the two countries. Also, the ambassador mentioned there is patto per l'Italia, patto per l'estero, many things happens, but in reality, we have to try to help the Italian company to export to Vietnam, because the export now is very, very low, and due to the situation. Also, Vietnamese company, they would like to sell in Italy or to buy, of course, from Italy. We are pushing, we are a lot doing this kind of effort to do, but what we've seen, this is something completely new. What you have seen is not easy. This is a little different approach. We try to training the local Vietnamese, because we have this virtual, digital platform we can use. Also, we can show the catalog of the companies in the meantime. So show the product, of course, like machinery and furniture. Usually when the company travel, they don't bring with them the real product. Of course, they show on the catalog. So from this point of view, it's very similar. The problem is the lackness of the presence, of the contact, of the feeling of the meeting. And this is quite new, but we are trying already a few months on this kind of digital platform to increase, because we have to absolutely have to protect the export Italian product in Vietnam and vice versa. So we will work a lot of this.
Of course, thank you so much. So on this very optimistic note, I would like to thank you once again, Mr. Ambassador, for joining us, Mr. D'Ercole for joining us and for supporting us once again. I also thank EuroCham for supporting us along with ICHAM and the embassy for this event. Filippo from Hanoi, thank you very much. And Tommaso as well. So on behalf of DP Group, thank you also to all the participants. And if you have any further questions, please get in touch with us, with the ICHAM, with the embassy for anything you may need. So thank you and stay tuned for the upcoming events. Bye.
Thank you.
Grazie, thank you. Congratulations for the presentation. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.